All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending.
I love the battles that we're having on offense and defense. When you have this back and forth, that's a good sign for a program.
We've become a much better tackling football team.
This is the deepest team offensively that we've had since I've been here.
When it comes to the game, we got to have the best guys on the field.
What's Trending? What's Trending is presented by Feastbox, donating 10% of every order to Full of Hope, a charitable organization that feeds hungry families. Fall camp is over. The Cougars are now in preparation for Sam Houston. Head coach Kalani Sitake, coordinators on offense Aaron Roderick, defense Jay Hill, all talked in a press conference yesterday, Jason. So here's the most interesting stuff. We begin with Aaron Roderick talking about the offensive group.
Yeah, I like where we're at. We have a lot of depth. This is the deepest team offensively that we've had since I've been here. You know, we might not have a Puka, per se, but I like our depth at every position, and I think we're more equipped to make it through the full season.
Now, depth is always used in fall camp. And Aaron has said this last week and now this week. He's very bullish on this offensive group in terms of its depth. He acknowledged the obvious, which is there's not an NFL receiver sitting there at the moment, but perhaps after this, walking into the season. But he's a straight shooter, and he says it's a good group. How do you feel about it?
I love this offense. I am extremely high on what I think this offense can do and produce this year. So to be able to hear from Coach Roderick that he feels the same, and he talks about the deepest offense he's had since he's been here at BYU. And you look back on some of the offenses and some of the weapons that he's had the opportunity to coach here in Provo, and that's really saying something. And I think what he said at the end, and you just alluded to it, we may not have a Puka, but he thinks that the talent that is here may be better equipped to handle the loss of a player. And so I love that, and I think that bodes well for this offense, for continuity, for maybe the fact that even if you lose a guy for a game or two, you're not going to have a drop-off. I like what I'm hearing on the offensive side.
And that's important because the receivers have been a little banged up this fall camp. But guys like Darius Lassiter and Keelan Marion have been not only good, they've been available. Yeah. Which last year, BYU walked in the season thinking, okay, we got Puka Nacua, we got Gunnar Romney, we've got Keanu Hill. We didn't know much about Cody Epps. We didn't know much about Chase Roberts. In that position specifically, BYU's feeling very good about the depth, meaning if we put out a couple of different, Parker Kingston, even a Hobbs Nyberg and so on, we feel good about not a lot of production lost, if no loss at all. Yeah. So let's go. And when you're playing 10 P5s in a row, you need that. BYU's never encountered the brutality of the schedule week to week like this year.
Well, and maybe while you don't necessarily think maybe you have a Puka now, maybe somebody provides what Puka did as the season goes on. Somebody
Keelan
grows into that
Marion
role.
is the most underrated offensive weapon BYU has at the moment. Like, watch this dude, number 17.
All right, let's talk quarterbacks, because everybody likes to talk quarterbacks. We know that the BYU starting quarterback is set. Keaton Slovis is the guy. But Coach Roderick talked about the backup quarterback.
Keaton's our starter, and then it's a little bit, we have a little bit of a unique situation at the backup. So Jake Retzloff is second with Cade Finnegan third. However, Cade has redshirted before and Jake has not. And so depending on the situation throughout the season, we'll make decisions about who would go in first.
Look, I like the transparency, and he brings up something that is part of making this decision. Who has eligibility and who's used red shirts, and who do you project down the road maybe you want to have for a little bit longer? I appreciated the honesty there. What did you make of what Coach Roderick was talking about in terms of the quarterbacks?
We thought Jake Retzloff would win the number 2. He was number one JUCO quarterback in California and the country by some reports. So him being the number 2 is not a shock, but the idea that they're saying out loud, we would like to redshirt him. Yeah. So we're all on the same page. He could play in 4 regular season games and the bowl game and still redshirt. That would be ideal. And I'll say it again. I don't want to find out how good Jake Retzloff is.
Right.
Unless BYU's just up huge and then Jake comes in. But I don't see a ton of those this year outside of the first 2 games, we hope. I think there will be a lot of competitive games where Keaton Slovis has got to play wire to wire. This is not 1980s whack where Blaine Fowler's coming in, sweep it up against New Mexico for Robbie Bosco and whatnot, right? But Blaine was ready, should he be needed, in the national championship game of the Holiday Bowl. So interesting that they say that out loud. And Cade Fennegan, we haven't seen him play yet. We thought we'd see him as a starter in the bowl game. It was Bowl J Mayava. We might see a little Cade. Who knows? It depends on the situation this year. If Jake has already played in 4 regular season games by week 7, he may just continue to play if they need him, and he may not be able to redshirt.
I was very interested to find out when he started talking about the depth chart at the quarterback position. I was kind of curious to know where Ryder Burton would fall, because in some of the limited reps that we were able to see towards the ends of practice during media
we see kind of 3s-on-3s.
Ryder Burton looked really good.
He looks good.
And I was curious if he had moved his way up the depth chart a little bit. Now, he's very young. He's got a lot of career left. So this is certainly nothing against him. I was very impressed with what I saw from Ryder Burton.
And now there's a redshirt this year.
Correct.
Like, Ryder should redshirt this year, and then he competes next year.
I liked the transparency, and it will be fun to watch that, depending on the situation, on who gets those backup spots, reps if needed. But I'm with you. The hope is we don't see any backup quarterback. Keaton Slovis is healthy the entire year, and that's the way it goes. That's what you're hoping for.
That's what we hope for, absolutely. Okay, Aaron Roderick also talked about, as you see some of the quarterbacks in that room, Cade Fennegan. We're not sure on who the 4th string is, whether it's Ryder Burton and Rick Billups. Let's be honest, 4th string doesn't really matter. Just the kind of top 3, Ryder, are the guys that are going to be in the mix in any given game. If you get to that 4th string, you're in some real trouble. But at tight end, there's one player who has shot up the ranks. Aaron Roderick, who is it?
Tava Taase is our number 2 guy right now. He's had a phenomenal camp. Can't say enough about him. He came in as our 8th tight end. Just asked for a chance to walk on and did a good job at Southern Utah. And Blair Peterson was the OC down there and had coached here with us for a few years. And Blair said good things about him. So we gave him an opportunity to walk on, and all he did was just shoot right up the depth chart. Every day he did something to get noticed. He's going to play a lot.
I'm not saying he's going to join the ranks of the next guys I'm going to talk about, but walk-on tight ends, there's a history of success there with Chad Lewis and Dennis Pitt. I'm not saying Mata'ava Taese is going to be the next guy there, but the idea of being a walk-on, getting an opportunity, and now shining is awesome. Obviously, Isaac Rex is your number 1. Taese comes from Southern Utah, and he's got an opportunity here. They've liked him at H. That's where Mason Wake played. Mason Wake has hung it up. We're going to miss Mason and his hurdles, right? But Taese makes a great play Saturday. That's a touchdown catch in the end zone that you see right there. That's exciting. You know who else was 8th string, by the way, and climbed up? One Steve Young at one point. I'm not saying he's going to be a
I think it's what you're
Pro
saying.
Football
Say
Hall
it.
of
Put
Famer.
It out there. Hot take. Say it.
Taese will be a Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's getting an opportunity and took advantage, which is great. And BYU needs some excellent blockers that can also catch some footballs. Let's go.
Look, good for him. You come into as a walk-on, and all you're asking for is an opportunity. And then not only do you get the opportunity, but then you take advantage of the opportunity. Like, I heard somebody yesterday saying that this is an indictment then on the other guys that he's passed. No, it's not. This is a talented.
What were we expecting from the rest of the group?
And you've got a guy that came in and has worked and proven himself. It's not an indictment on anybody.
Well, no one's proven after Isaac Rex.
Right.
Like Ethan Erickson made a heck of a catch against ECU that I've referenced. We didn't really see much else from Ethan Erickson.
Right.
Jackson Bowers is a ESPN top 300 kid. He's going to factor in somewhere.
There's a lot of talent at the tight end position.
Yeah, and there's Mason Fakahua has switched positions, but like, who's a proven pass catcher blocker that isn't named Isaac Rex Mason Wake at this point? There is not. So there was a chance there. Whoever says that, there wasn't a proven commodity sitting there behind those 2 guys. Now Mason Wake's gone.
One of the positions that, at least earlier in the offseason, looked like, okay, starting to get a little panicked here, was the O-line. You ended up losing some guys, obviously, to the NFL, but then also to the transfer portal. I think BYU did quite well bouncing back and getting an offensive line that I think is going to be really, really good. And Coach Roderick talked about the depth on the O-line.
We have 3 starters solidified right now. Obviously, Kingsley at left tackle, and then Paul Miley and Connor Pay will be starters as well. And that's We're certain about that. Those 3 guys will start. We're still working out, the full starting 5 and who will play where.
Interesting. You've got 3 starters right now. I was a bit surprised. Now, he goes on to talk a little bit more about Caleb Etienne, and he's likely going to be a starter. I was a little surprised that it wasn't an automatic already. I certainly expect that to be the case.
For Etienne specifically?
Yeah, for Etienne specifically. But look, I said before, we threw to the soundbite, I like what BYU has at the offensive line, especially after losing what you did, the type of talent that you did, to rebound the way that they have, and not just for what we expect the starters to look like, but from a depth standpoint, I'm very high on the O-line.
BYU did a great job with the O-line in the offseason and in this fall camp so far. It's going to be exciting. If Braden Keim plays right guard, by the way, he's got to be the tallest right guard in the country. He's 6'9". Waylon Lapuahu in the mix there as well. Simi Moala was a starter at Utah. He is not a starter initially here. Like, it's going to take him a sec after sitting out 22 when he transferred to Jackson State and then didn't play there. But there's some real quality in that group, we think. And that's super exciting because if that O-line's good, it gives you a shot on offense with Keaton Slovis and Aiden Robbins and company. Now, previously, it feels like, splitting the reps in practice didn't go to the ones as much. Perhaps that's changed. Perhaps it's the same, but here's Kalani Sitake on that idea.
The ones are going to get all the reps, and eventually the 2s will be able to get some in practice, but the ones need all the looks, and the 2s are going to have to get some of the looks, but be able to also learn from film and learn from the being off on the side and seeing it. But yeah, you're right. And when it comes to the game, we got to have the best guys on the field.
No more line changes, mid-defensive drive. And once you get to in-season, it's 1s and 2s that really, 1s get most of the reps, some of the 2s. The 3s and kind of 4s, that's more fall camp, practice squad, fall camp stuff. Now you're on the practice squad. Those are the reps you're going to give. Well,
and that's the interesting part. As he mentioned in the soundbite, the 1s are going to get the majority of the time. The 2s, they'll get some time, but their situation's a little bit different because they're going to have to try and take those mental reps, probably more than actual reps, because as he said, you want the best guys on the field, and that goes back to our original point that we talked about earlier in the segment. We talk about the depth. The hope is you don't have to use your depth. You talk about depth a lot.
Undoubtedly you will.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
But the hope is that your guys are healthy and you go through a year where you don't have to dip your toe into the depth.
Certain positions you won't, right? But Jay Hill has said he said to the team the other day in practice, to the defense, he said, and I think he meant the whole team, we need 50 guys to win. We need 50 guys. I would guess that's 22 on offense, 22 on defense, and perhaps the 6 on special teams that do the returning, the kicking, the punting, the holding, the snapping, right? 50 dudes. Does BYU have a better 50 this year than last year walking in? I think they do. I think they upgraded across the board on both sides of the ball in a lot of areas. Obviously, replacing Jaron Hall is tough, but you hope that Keaton Slovis can provide you something very similar to what Jaron did last year.
Injuries are always a part of athletics, unfortunately, and it's not just during the season. A lot of times you can deal with injuries in fall camp, and Kalani Sitake was asked how the team has come out of fall camp from an injury standpoint.
Michael Harper's the only season-ending injury. We're still evaluating some people to see if they'll be ready for the first game. Probably will know more towards the end of the week. But, yeah, we're still looking at guys that are banged up in it.
That's good news. You have one player. Unfortunately, it's a big one in Michael Harper.
Yeah,
certainly,
that was a bummer.
It was definitely a bummer. But good news that overall they've come out healthy. That's good.
It's the cost of the violence of the game that you inherently have injuries. You don't want ACLs in camp, of course, but that depth will be checked. And BYU's lining up for Sam Houston in how many days again?
Countdown to the Bearcats.
10 days away. 10 days. We have to add the away. 10
tomorrow, single digits.
Okay, tomorrow, single digits. How about that?